Thanks for tuning in to the second episode of Put a Fork in It, the podcast delivering fresh perspectives in the intersection of food, health, business, and creativity. Today's guest is awesome. We met back in our college days by way of the best club out there, Tap Dance Club, and we also happen to both be majors at the Park School of Communications at Ithaca College. Our guest today is none other than Ashley Moulton, who, in her own words, designs awesome learning experiences for children. As a food, health, and business podcast, you might be wondering, why interview Ashley? Well, not only does she have her master's from Stanford in learning, design, and technology, but she's also lived it, with a wide variety of professional experiences in childhood media, education, and design, and in tech, both in large multinational corporations like Nickelodeon and Google, and at small startup environments also. And even more importantly, Ashley is in the early stages of launching her own venture called Nomster Chef, a cooking and food app geared toward creating a shared food, health, and cooking experience for both parents and their children. I was super interested when I learned about it, when I saw her notification on Facebook inviting me to like her new page for Nomster Chef. I had to check it out and learn more. So, Ashley, thanks so much for agreeing to be on my second podcast. I'm excited to continue our last conversation and dig even deeper.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much for having me on.
Awesome. In the intro, I said a little bit about Nomster, but I'd like you to give us a little rundown. So what exactly is it?
Great question. So Nomster Chef is a interactive kitchen experience to help kids learn how to cook with their parents. And what the main part of the experience is a recipe app that is a step-by-step recipe guide focused on pictures because my target audience of young children, they don't know how to read. So they're picture-based recipes that really help the child take the lead in the kitchen. And then their parent is there to be their sous chef and support them in whatever way possible. And the reason why it's so important for parents and kids to cook together is because research shows that kids are more likely to try food that they've helped to cook. And so in theory, if they cook something healthy, it will make them more open to eating that healthy thing. And then hopefully will help to develop healthy eating habits for the rest of their life.
Yeah, for sure. That definitely makes a lot of sense. And I know you're still in the early stage of this, and that it also started as a graduate project when you were at Stanford. But knowing a little bit about your background and your interest in child media and all that stuff, food seems like it's a little bit out of the blue. Can you tell me a little bit about where that came from?
Sure. So food has been an interest of mine in terms of both cooking it and eating it. I really enjoy cooking, and living in New York City in the San Francisco Bay Area for the last 6 years, really gotten a chance to develop my own interest in food and try lots of interesting things. So just kind of had a personal interest, and then drawing on what I knew from my background in children's media, I was trying to think of what could be an activity that young kids, so preschool age, could do maybe in tandem with technology, but that had some sort of real world application in terms of, like physical things in the real world instead of just digital. And so thinking about that and what I know about preschoolers, cooking seemed like it could be a natural fit and something that could have an interesting real world experience that is tied to technology. So I started doing a little bit more research into that and learned about all of the research that has already been done and how cooking is so beneficial for the preschool age range. So there's lots of research around the actual how cooking helps kids develop eating habits, but there's lots of quote unquote more academic skills that that cooking can teach little kids. So for example, when you're measuring ingredients, you're actually practicing math, whether you realize it or not. Or even just looking at a recipe can actually help to foster literacy skills. So I started doing more research into all of the benefits that cooking can offer young children. And so that's really where that came from, personal interest in food, and also just learning in my own research how beneficial cooking and being around food is for little kids.
Hmm. Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know that there's definitely a lot of practical skills involved in cooking, like you were saying with the math and the literacy. I didn't even think about the literacy part, but the math is definitely obvious. I mean, like with fractions and breaking things in half if you need to like scale a recipe, or even just the simple like act of measuring. You learn about like in science class, you know, you learn about the meniscus and how like I think that's what it's called, the meniscus. Anyway.
Yeah.
Where it's like the liquid like sticks to the edge of the container when you're measuring, and like it like makes a dip. That's the meniscus.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway, so but so it did start as a grad project. So what? I know you said you had a personal interest in food and everything, but so why did you decide to keep it going?
It's a great question. So yeah, it started as my master's project at Stanford. I was in the Graduate School of Education there, in the Learning, Design, and Technology program. And so to graduate, we all had to invent something that helped people learn, which is super broad. But this was my something that was helping people learn. In my case, was preschoolers with the help of their parents. And yeah, it was my master's project. And then I kind of put it aside for a little bit. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the whole entrepreneur thing, and had another job in between, but really missed working on it and really wanted to help bring it to life. So I applied to a business plan competition that is run out of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Specifically for education-based businesses. And through that also is how you apply to the Education Design Studio Incubator that's also run through UPenn. And so I applied for that and got selected as a finalist to join the incubator, and then ended up being selected. So once I was selected into the incubator, I kind of took that as a sign from the universe that I should really go back to working on this full time. And so I decided to pursue it after I was selected.
That's really awesome. I mean, that must have been crazy to apply for and like go out on a limb and apply for it, right? And then to be selected. I mean, tell me about it.
It was a pleasant surprise. I had been getting great feedback from my professors and classmates at Stanford, but they knew me and they liked me, and so of course they're going to say nice things. So it was really great to hear validation from outside sources that like, hey, we think that this idea has legs and this could potentially become something. So yeah, that was really exciting.
And so where did you get the idea to apply for that contest and the incubator and all that?
Oh, so I'm on a education technology email newsletter, which is called EdSurge. And they list various competitions and such in the education technology industry. And I had seen it in there and decided to apply.
Was it like an easy choice to apply, or did you have
sure.
Any,
applying is always the easy part. You just kind of throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. So yeah, I figured I didn't have too much to lose in applying.
And what was the application process like?
Well, they ask a lot of questions about your business plan and also about the educational value of it. So, of course, any project that is related to education, you want to make sure that you're actually helping people learn something. So, asked a bit about that. So, it was just an online application. And then from there, narrow the pool down. And I had to submit more information. So created another presentation for them. And then, that was the process.
And the incubator was already part of that contest, or was that okay? And so, what exactly is that incubator? What is an incubator do?
Yeah, it's a good question.
What does it mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. And coming from my background before, I was in the media industry, so all this stuff is really kind of new in the tech world, even to me. But basically, there are things called incubators and accelerators. Some people say they mean different things. Some people use them interchangeably. But basically what they are programs to help startup companies get off the ground. And depending on the different program, they offer different things. So oftentimes it's mentorship. Sometimes it's professional services like lawyers. Sometimes it's office space. Sometimes it's, money. There's lots of different resources that these programs tend to offer. And then at the end of the program, they typically have some sort of presentation or a demo day where potential investors can come and see what the teams have been working on and potentially make an investment in the teams. And so that's what an incubator or an accelerator is. Usually when they, provide these services, they typically take some part of your company in terms of equity in exchange for offering the services. But all of the programs are different, and there's many of them now. And there are several that are education technology focused.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a ton that are food-based too, because it's a big expanding industry.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one pretty close to where I live in Brooklyn called Brooklyn Food Works, which is more for small businesses that are wanting to, sell their secret jam recipe at farmers markets. So more for actual food producers, but that's just an example of one that I know of that's right in my own backyard. That's a food incubator.
If you could just give me a little bit of time context about when did you start this project in school, and then how long did you take a break from it, and then when did you start up again with the contest and the incubator?
Sure. So I was a master's student from fall of 2014 to September of 2015. So graduated about a year ago, and took maybe 6 months off from it while I was working at another job, and then applied. And the incubator itself started in August and will run until January 2017.
Okay, and so just to give anybody listening to this a little bit of insight, if you're not listening to it right away, this podcast is being recorded in late September of 2016. So that means that the incubator started about a month ago, right?
Yes. Yep.
And so what have you gotten out of the incubator so far?
So it's mostly a remote program, but they bring all of the teams to Philadelphia once a month for in-person intensives. And so that's been great. They have brought in a lot of speakers to teach us about various topics. And so that's been wonderful. Also just meeting all of the other teams that are in different stages in their entrepreneur journey has been great. And also just the mentorship that the program provides and advice has also been great. So those have been the highlights so far.
Cool. And so tell me exactly what you're working on with Nomster right now. Where are you at with it versus where you were at 6 months ago?
Sure. So one of the biggest things I'm trying to figure out is the business. So my graduate program was really wonderful in helping us to think about the design aspects and really designing a product that helps people learn. And so that's what we spent most of our time on, was thinking about the educational aspects of it and how to design to promote education. But in my grad program, we didn't really talk a lot about the business side of things. So now I am really trying to work out what that means. So, what is the difference between Nomster Chef as a graduate school project versus Nomster Chef as a company, and how to actually turn it into a company. So that's my main focus. And as part of that, I will be running another pilot test with a bunch of families to get more feedback about the product itself.
Okay. And I know that from our previous conversations and also from watching the video on your website and everything like that you've run some other tests and there's been different things that you've tried out. And initially the concept was not so much only an app, but also a food delivery box with the items to make the recipes and things like that. So can you tell me about the testing process that you've been using and how that works and how you find people and what you actually do?
Yeah. So at Stanford, they're big proponents of what they call design thinking. Well, not just Stanford. Lots of other people use design thinking and the concept of human-centered design, which is the idea that rather than, being a brilliant inventor and squirreling yourself away in a cave for a year and inventing your great thing and then unveiling it to the public at the end, that it's actually really important to test your product with people at all stages of development. And the important emphasis being actually testing it with people and talking to people and finding out things about how they live their life and what problems they have currently, and trying to think of solutions, like how you might be able to solve those problems. So that is what I did. I talked to some families and got some insight from them about kids and food. And from there, started making prototypes. So prototypes are generally low fidelity versions of what your idea could be. So oftentimes they taught us in school, like draw things on Post-it notes and show them to people. Even if it's going to be a digital product in the end, you can actually get a lot of great feedback using a very basic version of what your product could be. And then that way you don't spend all your time doing the design and the engineering and all that stuff for something that people don't even want. So I did some low fidelity testing with families. In my case, that involved making just still images of the recipes and putting them on iPads. So it sort of felt like it was an app, but it wasn't actually real. It was just pictures. And watching families use that to make the recipes. And so learned a lot from that. One thing was trying to understand, when you have a product for both a parent and the child, how do you deal with that? Because you have very different users that are using the same exact thing. And one of my early versions, I had sort of like a parent tip version on the screen, and realized pretty quickly that it was unrealistic to expect parents to read the parent tips, because they have a small child in the kitchen. There's lots of things that you can knock over and spill. And, they're very concerned dealing with their child. And so they don't really have the time or wherewithal to, read a small parent tip that's, on the screen somewhere. So that was one of my earlier insights, was that if I needed to do any sort of parent education, it needs to happen not during the actual cooking process, because that's just not fair to ask parents to be reading that much when they're trying to cook with their child. So that's just one example of one of the changes that I made throughout my testing process. And you asked about how I test. Generally with this sort of thing, it's really observational. So giving them the product and then standing back and watching them use it and trying to say as little as possible and just seeing how they interact with it and where the problems are, what don't they understand about it, what works well in it, and then, interviewing them afterwards and getting their feedback from their perspective, what it was like to use the product.
And so would that mean that, like, for each family that you test with, you test individually, like you go to their house and just watch them cook something? Or that's one way to do it, and that's what I did during my grad school process. But as it grows and I test with more and more people, I won't be able to be in person with everybody. So a lot of it, I'll just have to rely on people reporting back to me what their experience was like. Okay. And so how did it feel going into the tests? Like, was it nerve-wracking or exciting, or how did it feel? And then how did it feel when you learned that, for example, were you really attached to the parent tip idea, and then you were kind of and it didn't work, or how tell me about that.
Yeah, it's always nerve-wracking. I'm sure you know yourself as a creative professional, whenever you share your work with somebody, there's always an element of fear. But it was both fear and excitement, because just seeing people use the thing that you made is pretty fun. And so, you learn to kind of take the negative feedback in stride, because, generally if people are having a positive experience, those are just ways that you can continue to make it better. I did have one user test where the recipe is definitely too challenging to try to accomplish with a 3-year-old. And that one kind of fell apart. The child ended up on the floor, rolling around, crying. That was kind of a disaster, right? But that was a good learning point to say, oh, this kind of recipe is actually too difficult. I need to pull back on the complexity. So you kind of try to take it all as different data points and try to learn from everything.
So what was that recipe? That was too hard.
It was making raviolis, but with like by hand. Like stuffing them.
Yeah.
I couldn't find. I really wanted to. I have this great ravioli press thing where you can make like I think it's like 16 raviolis at once very easily. But I couldn't find the right pasta sheets for it. So I couldn't use that. And so it ended up being much more labor intensive than I anticipated. And so, that was a good learning experience though, again, to understand like, oh, that level of crafting is too hard for a little kid. But I could totally see that recipe working for, a 12-year-old, I think could be totally appropriate for them.
Right. Or even like an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Somebody that's been with the program for a couple years.
Yep.
Cool. So talk to me about leaving your job to go and work on your own project full time.
Yeah. I mean, what do you want to know?
I mean, just everything that you experienced, like the decision, the feedback that you got from people.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. In Silicon Valley, the joke is that everybody, even your dentist, has a startup on the side. And so being in that environment, I think it's pretty usual for people to start their own thing. And so it wasn't like totally out of left field. But yeah, it's definitely, with every new experience, I think even if you're taking a new job at a corporation, there's always some sort of apprehension before you start. And I definitely experienced that. And, I'm still pretty new at this. I don't think I've been full-time quite 2 months yet. So I'm still trying to figure it out, to be honest. But try to keep in mind that whatever I do, I'm learning so much. And, that in and of itself is super valuable.
So what's one of the main things that you've learned since going on your own that's been like surprising and really useful?
Well, I don't know that it was surprising, but I am very much a people person. And so working by myself for extended periods of time is challenging for me. So I have learned, I guess, the importance of making sure that I do have meetings and brainstorms with other people that are not myself, just to keep the creativity and the momentum going. So I think I always knew that about myself, but it come into acute focus now that I am doing my own thing.
For sure. That's super important, like to understand those kinds of things about how you work so that you can optimize for that, especially when you are on your own a lot of time. Like it's similar for me because I spend a lot of time alone. I don't necessarily mind spending time on my own, but it's led me to find other creative ways to like be around people but still be by myself, like working in a coffee shop or going to a co-working space or something like that, where like there's still room for serendipity and I can like talk to people and throw out an idea or whatever, but I'm still kind of like in my own little world and can be focused on what I'm doing, but just not be so alone.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. So give me a rough estimate of what your day looks like now that you're not like getting up at, 8 a.m., commuting to work and coming home at, whatever time.
I don't know that I've really kind of found a set schedule or also it might just be that every day will be different. But I've been doing lots of meetings with people, just networking, with various people. So some days I have a lot of meetings. Some days it's more individual work time. It really kind of depends. Some days doing more stuff that's more administrative, that every business owner has to do that has nothing to do with the actual product or anything like that. So really kind of depends, but I do my best to keep a relatively regular work schedule. I'm a big proponent of work-life balance, and so I really try to make time for myself in terms of going to the gym and cooking my own dinner, which is very important to me, having time to see friends and family and all that stuff. So I try my best to keep a pretty regular work schedule. and, not be working 100 hours a week, because that's just not sustainable.
For sure. It's definitely not sustainable. So what does it mean when you say, I'm working on Nomster?
Well, that very much depends on the day. Sometimes I'm thinking about things related to the product. Sometimes I'm thinking about marketing and, could I write a blog post about something? Sometimes, I don't know, it's a lot of the admin stuff, keeping track of expenses and things like that. It could be really anything. One thing I'm learning being on my own is, and I've heard this before, it's such a cliche of startup life, but, I am the IT department, the HR department, the legal department, it's like you have to wear all those hats. And that's like the most cliche thing about starting your business ever, but it's totally true. So it really depends on the day, which multitude of those hats I'm wearing.
For sure. It's totally true. It's also totally cliche, but I mean, cliches come from something.
Yes.
So. Just like stereotypes come from something. But so you mentioned networking. What do you do for networking? Where do you do your networking? What does it mean?
Gosh, that's a good question. A lot of times it's following up on relationships with people that I already know, but just kind of updating them on what I'm doing now. I am involved with a couple of professional organizations. One is the Children's Media Association here in New York. And so going to events there. Sometimes it's just good old fashioned, well, I don't want to say cold calling because nobody really uses the telephone anymore, but cold emailing people whose work I've just come across and find interesting and seeing if they're willing to share more with me. So it kind of comes in a variety of forms.
I know that you've worked in a lot of corporate environments, specifically for big companies. You've also worked in some small startup spaces. What are you taking with you from your big corporate experiences that's really, really helpful in building your own startup?
Yeah, well, definitely just learning by example and seeing how the big companies are kind of structured and how they deal with workflow and things like that. Of course, none of that translates directly to me yet, but thinking ahead, it's easy to draw lessons from different companies and, both good and bad, practices that you see that you like or you don't like, and how, you may want to run your own company one day. But on a practical sense, realizing that many of these skills I've actually done or I've actually practiced before. It seems like in one sense I'm doing something completely new, but then when I think back to my corporate job lives, many aspects of things that I'm doing right now have a direct correlation. Just trying, it's been interesting to see how things translate, even little things like one of my first duties when I started at Nickelodeon was documenting travel and expenses for people. And it's been quite a few years since I've done that, but now I have to do it for myself. And so I feel like, this is kind of old hat. This is something I've done before. So it's interesting seeing how just random aspects of my previous jobs have been popping back up.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting one, documenting travel and expenses. What are some other examples of specific things that are completely random that you're like, I didn't expect this, but it's so easy because now I know I've done it before.
Oh gosh. The first one that comes to mind is, just interviewing people. So that's something. So you and I both went to the Park School of Communications at Ithaca College. And so going back, even before I this was technically a job, I worked on Newswatch, which is the student-run news broadcast. And one of my jobs one semester was to be a reporter. And so going back all the way to the beginning of my career and just learning how to talk to people, I definitely developed that skill at Ithaca. And then that came back around in grad school when in design thinking practice, you interview people. And so did it there. And then I worked for YouTube Kids as a contractor for a while. And one of my jobs there was interviewing people. And so, that has been something that I've been doing for a while, really. And because of that, if I am talking to a parent about how they might use the product or just, what their lives are like, that's a skill that comes pretty naturally to me that I don't know that I could have predicted as a 18-year-old on a student newscast, how I'd be using that skill, but definitely it's come back around.
Well, that's good. Yeah. I mean, interviewing is definitely an important skill, especially when you're the CEO of your own company. And, you have to, it sounds like a lot of your testing too was interview based. So it's definitely great that you have that skill.
Yeah.
It's, as we can see, something I'm still working on.
Well, it's always, everything is always a learning process.
For sure. Being that this is a food podcast and you're working on a food app, let's talk a little bit more about the food part.
Sure.
So we have been talking a little bit before about the fact that you're like working with different experts and things like that. And I asked you last time that we were talking, when you're thinking about your app and the food aspect, a major part of it was actually creating healthy recipes and you cite some information about vegetables being too bitter for kids, and also childhood obesity being a major problem, things like that. And that's definitely something I can connect to, and I'm really passionate about fighting obesity. So can you tell me about like your definition of healthy and what that means, and the where you're coming from with that?
Yeah, so it's interesting, I think, because healthy can be kind of a loaded word in some ways. So I would say that my approach to it is fairly simple in that, just looking at it more from a holistic perspective, which is, it seems from science that it is better for people to eat whole foods rather than processed foods. So meaning, whole vegetables, whole grains, animal proteins, rather than things that food scientists can concoct in a lab somewhere. So for me, it's thinking, how can we encourage people to eat more whole foods? And very closely tied to that is cooking. There's a lot of research that says that meals that people cook at home are way healthier than meals you eat out for a variety of reasons. One being that restaurants tend to put tons of butter on things. Also, things that restaurants make tend to be things that you can't make at home. Like, when is the last time that you actually made your own French fries from scratch with potatoes? Like, probably never. I've never done that. So thinking about it from more of a holistic perspective of trying to eat fewer processed foods, trying to cook at home as much as possible. I mean, people are busy and, I'm a realist. I get that you're not going to be able to do that for every single meal, but trying your best to do it as much as you can. And for me also, it's about balance. I definitely don't subscribe personally to any of the fad diets that are out there. Because oftentimes they emphasize eating only one type of food. And that just doesn't make sense to me. I think it should be all about balance. And that does include having, quote unquote, unhealthy food sometimes. I like to use as my role model Cookie Monster, who in recent years has rebranded himself as the sometimes Cookie Monster, because it's not that you can't have cookies, but cookies are sometimes food instead of an all the times food. So I would say that kind of principle guides my personal philosophy and how I think about being healthy.
So are you going to have some dessert recipes then in your Nomster Chef?
Yeah, I hope to. And, where appropriate, may try to have, the healthier version of dessert foods where appropriate. But it's definitely something I am looking into.
Cool. And tell me, what's been involved in developing the food aspect of it?
Well, that's something that I'm still kind of at the beginning stages of. I did a little bit of it when I was working on it as my grad student project, and we'll be building out lots more recipes in the upcoming months. But kind of from broad strokes, one thing that I'm thinking about is trying to make vegetables prominent in the dish. Like you kind of alluded to earlier, kids are innately pushed towards not liking vegetables, unfortunately for humans. Because of our biology, kids are predisposed against liking bitter foods, and they're also predisposed towards liking sweet carbohydrate-based foods. So trying to expose kids to a variety of vegetables, and also the research has shown that it's really important to have repeated exposure in order for kids to actually start to like something new. So trying to emphasize vegetables, trying to repeat the same vegetables to give them multiple chances to cook it in different ways and try it in different ways. So thinking about that, and then also thinking about the actual format of the recipes themselves, because it's totally possible for little kids to cook in the kitchen. A lot of parents are kind of wary, but yeah, you can have a child as young as 3 or maybe even 2 if the child's really mature, cooking in the kitchen. But you also do want to think about the types of recipes. So for example, something like a risotto where you have to stand over the oven or over the stovetop for 20 minutes stirring constantly. That's not really appropriate for a 3-year-old. But something that involves baking could be totally appropriate for a 3-year-old because they're not, over the open flame. The parent puts the food in the actual oven, and so they're not really involved in the heating step. So thinking about the actual structure of the recipes, and then also thinking about what types of foods. So one way to encourage children to eat new things is to present it in a familiar way. So sometimes it can be good to have a kid-friendly item like pizza in order to introduce a new food. But I also do think it's important to expose children to all different kinds of foods. So foods from different cultures or things that people may not think of being typical kid food, quote unquote. So I think trying to find a balance there between, kid-friendly food, but also challenging kids. You do want to expose them to things that are different that they may not be getting at, the children's menu at a restaurant.
So can you give me some examples of ways that you've been able to accomplish that balance?
Like I said, we're still kind of at the beginning and thinking about all these things. So I would say at this point, it's more aspirational than anything I can point towards evidence, but it's definitely something I'm thinking about as I'm developing more recipes.
So what recipes are you working on right now?
Oh, I can't tell you that. That's secret.
Come on. What were some of the most successful recipes that you've tested so far?
So during my grad school project, probably the biggest crowd pleaser was a tomato and mushroom pizza made with whole wheat crust, and with the real stars of the show being the cherry tomatoes and mushrooms on top. It was really successful in terms of people enjoying making it and also enjoying eating it. So I'd say that was the biggest hit so far, but definitely working on building out more and more like that.
Have you always been into cooking, or was it something that was a recent development for you personally?
Yeah, for me, it came rather later in life than you might expect, given my current line of work. My mom is an awesome cook and cooked almost every night, but it just wasn't something, I guess, that I was interested in as a child. And also, my brother and I were big into extracurricular activities, so we often were running around and not really around when she was cooking. So it wasn't really something I learned at home. And then all of a sudden, I think like is typical for many people, found myself in a college dorm that was pretty far from the dining hall. And I didn't have a meal plan. So all of a sudden I was responsible for cooking for myself. And so the first time I really did that was in college. And I'd say really the big kind of turning point for me, I actually owe to my brother-in-law, Jim, who is a crazy foodie and a very accomplished home chef, if I do say so myself. And when I moved to New York after college, he would invite us over to their apartment and teach my husband and I how to cook. And so I think a lot of what I learned from him, and that really sparked my interest in it. And also just living in New York City, there's so many good things to eat and try, all different types of food. Just being exposed to so many different things, I think really was the turning point for me also.
Do you have a favorite thing to cook?
Oh man, that's hard. I actually really personally thrive on novelty in cooking. So rather than, I mean, of course I have some standby recipes that I make over and over, but that tends to bore me. So I do really like trying different things. So yeah, I don't think I would say I have a favorite thing. I usually just like to try new recipes.
Do you usually follow recipes or do you make stuff up?
I typically am a recipe follower. I've been trying to challenge myself more recently and trying to go rogue off recipe. But for me, actually, it's not super challenging to come up with something, but in order to really do that, you have to plan in some sense what you're buying from the grocery store so that you don't waste food. So that's why I usually use recipes, because then I know exactly what I'm going to get at the grocery store. But it is fun to improvise when you do just kind of buy a random assortment of things and figure out how they fit together.
Yeah, or look in the pantry and see what's there.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite type of cuisine?
Oh man, well, it's tough. I'm half Italian, so I suppose that those sorts of foods will always be near and dear to my heart. But I like so many different types of things. I really like Thai and Indian. Oh
my God,
Japanese.
I love Thai.
Yeah, I mean, I really have yet to meet a type of cuisine that I dislike.
Yeah, I'm getting to that point. Growing up, it was very white pasta and butter, chicken nuggets, grilled cheese, pierogies. That was the extent of my food as a kid. And it was only because I was really picky, and also I was busy, like you. But now actually since college and from studying abroad and living in a homestay, my food has so diversified, and I can't get enough Thai food specifically.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that I think a lot of people assume that young kids wouldn't be interested in, but it's actually not true. If you start exposing them to it at a young age, my 5-year-old niece loves sushi, for example, which is something that I was not even brave enough to try until I was probably 22 years old. So, I that's part of what I'm trying to do is encourage a love of diverse types of food in young kids. Because I was similar. I wasn't picky, but I also, just had never tried a lot of those foods until I was much older.
Yeah, I think that's a common theme. It's interesting because when you think about the different types of food out there, in different countries, and my boyfriend, he is American, but his parents are from Vietnam, and so he has a completely different food experience, and so it's just interesting, especially when you look at Asian cuisines, because they have so many different flavor profiles, whereas American foods have not that many different flavors. It's starting to become more adventurous lately, but just the way that you're exposed to flavors and spiciness, for example, I didn't eat anything spicy as a kid, like, but now I like spicy food, and like, but it took a while to get here.
I think part of that too is that American culture has really changed in terms of food. When I look at things that my nieces and nephew eat now, who knew what edamame was when I was a kid? Like no one.
Yeah.
But that's a typical kid food nowadays. Or seaweed snacks is like another Trader Joe's favorite, I think, for a lot of little kids. And I think you've seen a lot of like internationalization in just like the typical American grocery store, even since we were little kids. And in a world where even Taco Bell was advertising sriracha as an ingredient, things have certainly changed since we were young, and which is exciting to me, since I love food. It's great to see those sorts of things spread.
So moving away from food for a second, we're going to get a little bit towards the end of the interview now, but I did want to touch a little bit on the business stuff. I know you're still figuring it out, but I wanted to hear a little bit about your thoughts on, the business models that you're considering and that are popular in tech and things like that, what you're seeing, because I'm not a tech expert, but you're in the tech side of things now. And so what are you seeing as out there, possible, exciting, going on in the field in general, and also that you're considering specifically for your own business model?
So it's an interesting time because I think there might be a public perception that all you have to do is put your app in the App Store and then you're an internet millionaire. But that is just not true. Maybe people don't think that. I feel like some people do, though. I think
I'm sure some people think it.
A lot of app developers are realizing that the business model of selling an app one time for $3.99 or whatever isn't doing great right now, because I think a lot of people just expect free apps. So a lot of people just aren't willing to pay for apps at all. So that's a challenge, I would say, in the industry. What some app developers have gone towards are things like freemium models, where it's free, but then you have to pay for add-on packs. So like a lot of like game-based apps do that. It's free at first, but if you want the super awesome armor or whatever, then you have to pay. So some people have had success with that. Subscriptions are another model that some people have done well with, but I think people are still really trying to experiment and figure out what works. And especially in the children's app market, if you look at like the top app for kids, most of them belong to big name brands that you would know. So the Sesame Streets, the Disneys, the Nickelodeons, they tend to do the best in the kids app market. Of course, there's some independent game developers that do great, but by and large, they're the ones that are on top. So I do think it's an interesting time in the industry, and I certainly have not figured out the answers myself. So I don't know that I can impart any sort of wisdom, but it is an interesting time, and just like the rest of the media industry, like many websites are also trying to figure out how to monetize. So it's an interesting time kind of industry-wide right now, I think. Mm-hmm. And I certainly am not smart enough to have the one magic answer.
What are you seeing that's causing those big companies to be successful within the app?
Well, I think especially for little kids, the character recognition is so key. Thinking back to how huge Frozen is and was, for example, anything related to Anna and Elsa, kids are very excited about that. So I think it's very, very character driven. And so those big brands are the ones that have a recognizable character. So it makes a lot of sense.
So how are you going to use that within your Nomster Chef app?
That is a great question that I am not quite sure the answer to. I'm going to be doing, like I said, a lot of experiments and user testing and talking to parents and kids and trying to figure stuff like that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you already like have the Nomster Chef little mascot dude. I'm sure that's like definitely a great opportunity to explore characterization.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, who knows? I'm still so early at this stage. It's difficult to say.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think like a lot of different things could work based off of what our conversation was last time. And things like, I mean, even not so much a subscription necessarily, but like even if you could make like unique curriculum-based like groupings, like say that like work on a particular vegetable on a particular skill or something that like is say includes like, I don't know, 5 different recipes, and then you like level up, and like, so you pay for that grouping, and you pay for the next grouping that like is the next level up or something. You know, it could be an interesting way to like innovate the business model side. I mean, I think there's a lot of different potential for different kinds of like alternatives to like a simple subscription or like a just buying the app or something like that.
Yeah, who knows? I'll definitely be trying a lot of things for sure.
Have you gotten any real feedback on that yet from your tests?
Nope, not yet. That's still things to be determined.
What are your main goals for Nomster as you move into the next stages of the incubator and finishing the incubator?
Yeah, so the main thing I'm focused on right now is making sure that I'm building the right thing because, again, with the design thinking and human-centered design, the last thing I want is put a lot of time and resources into developing a product that people don't care about or don't like. So really trying to focus on building the right kind of product and figuring out what that is. And then eventually, at some point, I hopefully will launch for real, and it will be a real product that anybody can interact with. So, you know, that's the ultimate goal, of course, is to actually get something out there in the world. And so I hope to be doing that at some point in the relatively near future. Yeah, those are my main focuses.
Any thoughts to share for anybody that's got an idea for a new product that they are like really into, but they don't know where to begin?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the biggest piece of advice is to actually put it in front of somebody, even if it's your roommate. You know, it doesn't have to be a stranger, but just getting some feedback. I think people, it makes sense because it's very risky to share your ideas with people who can feel that way sometimes. But just putting it in front of people and getting their feedback and getting either validation and them saying like, yeah, I could see this being useful, or, you know, negative validation of like, no, this is stupid. You shouldn't do this. You know, just trying to get it in front of people from the very beginning, even if it's, like I said, sticky notes that you're starting off with, you can still get a lot of really good information. So I'd start off there, just trying to talk to people. And then, you know, nowadays, there's a lot of opportunities for people trying to start things, whether it's an incubator, accelerator, or something less formal, just like a meetup group that's for people who have ideas. You know, anything that you can get involved in to kind of help you forward it. You know, there's lots of stuff out there nowadays, so certainly seek it out.
Awesome. And even when you're like bringing ideas up to like your roommate or, you know, other people that might have a little more expertise in the area that you're looking to make your thing, how do you kind of sort through that advice between like, yeah, do it, no, don't do it, or like, you know, how do you sort through that advice of like what's actually useful and what's like something to ignore?
That's the $1 million question. And of course, one of the things that you learn in thinking about user testing is you don't necessarily want to like ask people like, what features should we build? Because like people don't really know. You more trying to get a sense of what problems they have that you can solve. And sometimes you just have to ignore them. And especially when your users are 3 years old and you just have to take everything they say with a grain of salt, right? So sometimes you do have to kind of parse like, okay, the person is saying this, but what I think they actually mean is this. And, you get that just from talking to several different people, I would say.
Awesome. So I think that's going to have to wrap it up. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
The only thing is that if people want to get involved and are interested in becoming recipe testers, we have a sign-up form on the website, which is nomsterchef.com, just spelled Nomster, chef.com. And they can go ahead to the Try It page on the website and share their information.
Cool. Thanks. So thanks so much to Ashley, the founder of Nomster Chef, the app that helps parents bond with their children over cooking and healthy eating. It was really great to chat with you and hear more about Nomster and everything you're going through right now with that. I'm sure the listeners will get a lot from hearing about your experiences and learning about testing and all that kind of stuff. I hope they're able to find some tangible information and inspiration to create their own visions. And thanks to the listeners for tuning in to this episode of Put a Fork in It, the podcast that offers fresh perspectives at the intersection of food, health, business, and creativity. We look forward to future episodes and hearing from you with your comments, questions, and feedback on what you'd like to hear on this show. You can email me at contact@kaylena.com. That's contact, CONTACT, @CAYLENA.com. With your ideas and questions, and make it a delicious day.